Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jordan. I just got back from Vegas, my very first trip in Vegas. I went to the Gathering. It was a music conference, 3 days of networking and shows. I got to meet industry professionals from the record label side, from the publicity side, got to meet DJs and radio programmers, and they got to see a lot of cool bands, up and coming bands and more established acts. The final act was Kay Flay, got to see her perform, her first show in a very long time. And I actually got to film an episode of 5 Tracks that inspired me with Kay Flay, which you can check out soon. My guest today on the show is Laura Marano. She's a singer, songwriter, and actress. You may know her from Austin and Ally on the Disney Channel. She also is in Netflix romantic comedies now. She just completed one called Choose Love, which will be out in the fall. It's the very first Netflix interactive romantic comedy. So we got to talk about that, as well as her new album, her upcoming debut album. So here it is, my interview with Laura Marano. I guess we can just get right into it. So I'm sure like everyone starts out with, how do you balance music and acting? But really, like, I'm picturing like, is there like Tuesday's music day and Thursday is acting day? Like, I'm picturing almost like this kind of linear. I know that's not how it works, but you know.
It's such a great question because I still feel like I haven't fully figured it out yet. It's so funny. I was even talking to my sister about this months ago. I mean, literally, this is just a few months ago, and I've been doing this for how many years? And I'm like, maybe what I should do is like per week, I have more of a focus on music one week and then acting the next week. And, she kind of just laughed at me because unfortunately, both industries just don't work that way, right? It's just,
right.
There can be super slow acting weeks and super slow music weeks and super intense music and acting weeks. And sometimes those happen and occur on the same weeks. So, I'm going to be honest, I'm still figuring out that balance. I think it does come into time management. I think what I've struggled with as well is I'm getting close. I'm definitely not there yet, but I definitely have figured out a little bit more of that balance between the two. I think what is the struggle is now for like my personal life and like my home life, I think also should be a priority, and definitely in the last few years has not been. So, this song really came from that idea. I was going to film a movie in New Zealand, and then I was doing my first tour after that, and I still wanted to write songs for the album I knew I wanted to put out. And so I just like crunched literally like so many sessions into a few weeks, lost my voice, like all these different things, and was like, do I rest and cancel my sessions, or do I write about this? And I chose number 2.
Yeah, this song, this new single that we're talking about, it's a little bit more serious, a little more heavy than your previous work. Like, is it difficult do you feel like, oh, this is a serious song, like we need to, like, does it feel like a different mindset, or can you does it feel just like writing another song with just that has a more serious tone?
To be honest, it's really just about what I'm feeling every day. So this session, I worked with an awesome producer named Todd Spatafor. Spatafor, he's also Italian. I don't know necessarily that's how he says his name with the hands, but Todd and I hadn't worked together before. It was our first session, and I had just left another session a couple of days prior, basically like venting into that session. We ended up writing a totally different song, but I was saying like, oh my God, especially I was doing all these sessions with people I hadn't worked with before. And I just was stretching myself way too thin and was like, I feel like I can't give the best of me right now. I'm having a really hard time. Plus, I think there was definitely people in my life as well, both on a professional and personal level, who wanted more of me as well, whether it was like making time for them or, other kind of things. And so I think when this session came, that morning, I really was like, I had way too many things to do. I knew I wasn't gonna be able to do it because I was gonna be in a session. And I just like came up with this idea and I sent him a acapella voice memo, which is always also a little scary because I hadn't.
Because it's raw. There's no filter on it. Yeah.
Yes. And like, you know, I sometimes come to myself on keys. This, I was like literally in my kitchen and just was kind of like on my way. And I'm like, hi, Todd, nice to meet you. What do you think of this idea? And just like sung like the verse, pre and chorus idea. And he like loved it. He was super into it, which I really appreciated. He was super supportive. And, you know, sometimes I'll come in with an idea and the producer or writers I'm working with will be like, ah, great idea. And then like they change it completely, which happens in a session and is totally fine. There are sometimes I'm like very happy with the direction it takes. There are sometimes where I get a little bitter where I'm like, that was really not the idea that I came in with. And I almost wish I saved that idea for another session. But he kind of was just like, let's do it. I love it. Love the idea. And our little baby was born.
That's such a great story because we're living in the world of 7 or 8 co-writers and studio sessions and, you know, managers and publicists scrutinizing the chords you use leading into the chorus, or, you know, this one little cowbell sound, you know, like everything's so micromanaged. So
always the cowbell sound. Yeah, you know, listen, I actually don't mind collaboration. I don't prefer big rooms because I just like can't hear myself think. And I think it does become a lot of like people just like jumping in.
Right.
But I definitely have done sessions in bigger rooms that I didn't like. Definitely, I like the song that came out of it. But, you know, especially for this album, I have a few songs that I also just like wrote completely by myself, because sometimes I think it also is important to just, whether it's songwriting or just life in general, really zone everyone else's voices out and just kind of focus on your own. And so I have been doing a lot of that. But this session, you know, it was great. It was just me and Todd, and you never know what kind of comes from it. And he's like a sick producer. I think the production is so awesome and it worked great.
Yeah, I didn't mean to trash session writing. I just meant that it's nice to hear an organic, like writing sending a voice memo to the producer kind of story is nice. That's all I was saying.
No, I think you agree. And there is something that you feel like extra proud of it in a weird way. I'm like,
right. Really, it also is like very cinematic. Like, you know, I'm not just saying this because you're an actress, but you know, like you can picture the scene where you're like on the phone and you're, you know, like it's very cinematic. Like I love those music bio scenes in music biopics when they're writing their big song and it's like Johnny Cash going, I fell into a burning ring of fire. That's it. You know, like that kind of stuff.
Or so like in Bohemian Rhapsody when Freddie Mercury's like just starts singing that on the piano and you're like, oh my God, is that going to happen? Because if it is, that's amazing.
Right. I will say, I don't know if you watched the Beatles documentary, the Get Back documentary, but there are like scenes where you can see Beatles songs actually being creative. Anyway, let's get back to your stuff. I could
the Beatles all day. I'm very
yeah. Well, I'm sure you do interviews and you've answered a million inspiration questions and this kind of thing. So, you know, got to keep it fresh. That's you mentioned the debut album. It is a debut album, which is kind of funny to think of because you've been singing and releasing music for so long.
Yeah.
So first of all, before we get into that, I noticed, you know, if you look over really since COVID started, since quarantine, you've kind of had a musical metamorphosis. You've matured your sound, you've matured your aesthetics. The videos have like the Arrow video, very polished, widescreen cinematic, you know, sexy hunk co-star, you know, the whole thing. So tell me about what the difference has been since COVID. Was there a conscious decision like, now we need to hit the gas on this music career?
You know what? It kind of goes back to your first question, right? About balance. In the pandemic, I didn't have a choice of having to choose between the two for the first time in my life, right? Acting was just
blurry.
I know. You did get blurry. There we go.
I'm just going to like this. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm sure is very comfortable for you to just be really hunched over. Yeah. No, but the pandemic, I mean, film and television and the acting industry was completely shut down for a few months. Like that industry started back up really slowly. Whereas the music industry, obviously the live music industry and the touring industry was completely shut down. But making music and being able to connect. Oh no.
You're still here. This is a one shot. This is a one shot. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hello.
You're good.
Making music and being able to connect with fans and listeners, that continued, and that actually I felt like intensified during COVID. So for the first time in my life, I didn't have to make a choice. I didn't have to really do the balancing act. I definitely had a little bit of a balancing act between work and home life, but between music and acting, I could just fully focus on music, which I think was really beneficial for me as an artist and as a creative, and I think a really beautiful thing for me to do. Because I didn't have that pressure of like, oh my God, I have to do something else for acting today, or I have to do this or whatever. And, there's definitely work I was still doing more on the producing side in the film and television world, whether it was like looking at scripts, yada, yada, yada. But in terms of that balance, it was almost like the world made that choice for me because of the circumstances. And
Right.
I think my, I think my songwriting, I think the fact that I could like focus on my voice every single day. I performed, ironically, some of the most I performed in my life during 2020. And I think that was all really great for me in terms of honing in my sound and honing in
Did you
that
do
art.
any live stream concerts? That was a big thing to do. Like,
So many. I was like just me and my keyboard, or my
it felt good though, right? It felt good though.
It did. It was really
Yeah.
cool to kind of connect and kind of strip everything down and, be able to play things just like in their simplest form. I did even like a little bit of a virtual tour when my UEP came out, which was like a little bit more like tracks and lighting and stuff like that. But I think some of my favorite things was just being in my like keyboard room and just playing with my
How
songs.
much do you think the isolation of quarantine, how did that affect your songwriting? Because it's hard to write like a big Katy Perry arena pop rock anthem when you're like sitting there feeling like Fiona Apple with a piano, like.
Well, yeah, I think there's a few different aspects, right? Because I think there's the emotional aspect that goes into songwriting in terms of the lyrical content. And obviously it was a time where I think so many of us felt really lost. I also weirdly had a lot of songs that I had written prior to 2020 that I was like finishing up and working on during 2020. So in terms of like actually writing, I didn't do that much writing. I wrote a song. It was the first time I ever put a song out by myself that I wrote completely by myself. That was a love song that I was very, very proud of. But even that song, I feel like I wrote right before the pandemic hit. I think it wasn't until after 2020, I was working on my Us EP and I was going through a breakup that I think that type of genre that you're even talking about, the kind of more intimate, just like minimal sounding, which I always loved on a production side, but even in terms of like songwriting, really came to play. And I think maybe it was a combination of 2020 and the feelings that were there, all the feelings I was feeling about my breakup, and just being able to kind of like really write for the first time in a long time that was like around like 2021. So I definitely felt like the pandemic played a part in that. But in terms of like actually writing in 2020, I didn't do that much of it because I had songs I'd already written that I was working on.
But you refined like your sound and were able to workshop them, and
For sure.
and you can also send stems to people or send demos to people, and they had time to give you feedback. It wasn't just like a rush thing in the car, like, oh, this sounds good, like.
No, oh no, it was like obsessed about, maybe too much to a point where we had so much time to just be like, you know what? I was the person who was like, I'm not sure about the cowbell. Like it was a little too closely listened to, but I also appreciate that and loved having that time to do that.
And the album, so the tough thing with releasing an album is what you release before the album comes out, like how many singles, what you leak, what you tease on TikTok. Has that been, because you've never had to do this before, you never had a full length album? How has that experience been in terms of planning out the rollout of the album?
It's been, for the most part, really fun, actually, because I think this is the first time that I'm coming in, and the songs aren't all finished quite yet. They're written; they just have to, be produced and finished. But I know what I want to title it. I know what I want the aesthetic to be based on the title and based on like the lyrical content of the album. So I have felt more than ever I've come in. I think I was very inspired by Dua Lipa's interviews about future nostalgia, where she was like, we had everything finished before I started doing anything. I definitely am not that organized in terms of like, not everything is finished and we're still doing kind of the release plan, but I knew what I wanted, definitely kind of the first few singles to be. And I think that was also more in terms of trying to transition out from the EP trilogy that I had done. I had some unreleased songs I played on tour that went really well that I knew fans really wanted to have immediately. But even picking like the focus track of the album when the album comes out, all of that I think was very much able to kind of be discussed and figured out beforehand, which is really exciting. But as you said before, it is a little strange. Like, obviously, I feel, I've been releasing music for a while. It's kind of bizarre. This is my debut album, but I've also been insanely inspired by Ray and the fact that I feel like her story is really, really interesting and inspiring, that she was with a label for years and wasn't able to kind of release that album, which unfortunately is a kind of a norm with labels. It's like,
yeah. I won't, let's not get into label bashing, but
I will not. I will say there's a reason I'm independent, but
well, no, I mean, because the issue, and I've seen this firsthand. They'll sign somebody, you get a single, you get an EP, maybe you get a second EP, but they're like, "We'll get your album out. We'll get your album out," and then 3-4 years later, it's like, "Where's the album?" So you can kind of get stuck there.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like, listen, I wouldn't even taken an EP. But I think it's really, I think, an exciting time, still very hard and very challenging, but an exciting time to be independent. And it feels, for me, even though in some ways it feels like it's been like the longest time coming. And, I released my first single as a solo artist, like not having to do with Austin Alley or anything, back in 2016. So it's been like 7 years, but it just feels like the right time to finally have this debut album out. I think I was also, in a weird way, being independent, I still had, you have the creative side and then you have the kind of like business side. And I think I had a lot of fear in terms of going straight to releasing an album, because I think you really put a lot of weight behind your debut album, which I think is valid.
And also I think it just helps having a separation from Austin Alley, not being right after Austin Alley, because even if you would have released a mature adult album, you were so close time-wise to that people would have thought it was an extension of
100%. Well, I still get people thinking Boombox was like connected to Austin Alley, which it really wasn't actually. Like, I remember someone saying, being like, that song was on Austin Alley. I was like, that song was not on it. I understand why people think it.
Little Mandela effect going on there. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes, exactly. And I'm like, I actually understand that. I think there was a very conscious decision on my part and my team at the time's part in having a pretty like pop song be the first single out. And I agree with you. I think the time has been nice to have between, I think a time in my life that was definitely music that was way more pop and felt a little bit younger, and now my music that feels definitely a bit more mature. I mean, I definitely still have pop songs that I love, like Bad Time, Good Time that I released earlier this year, and even Arrow a little bit, definitely were more like straight pop, which I don't hate. Like, I love that, and I love that vibe. I definitely think the next few songs and the majority of the album fall into I'm definitely more like singer-songwritery pop. I love the phrase moody pop. Um, and I feel like it's kind of more in that direction. But I loved also putting out more pop songs as well earlier than you.
Maybe we'll go back to that kind of 2000s era with like the Fray and Five for Fighting and Sarah Bareilles and that kind of era, you know.
I love that era. I still do think I feel like
That's your childhood era, kind of.
yes, 100%. It's like in that sweet spot when I was like a tween teen and like just absolutely obsessed with that time. But I feel like, or I don't even know, maybe I was younger than a tween. I do feel like a lot of the songs do still feel like they do feel moodier, I would say, than even some of those songs. But this song, and then even the song I'm putting out after this, yeah, I'm excited for people to hear, because I think it's definitely more in the direction representative of what the album's going to be.
Now, I got to ask, you're sitting here, is this staircase behind you, is it haunted? Are you in a haunted house? Is this a ghost hunting situation?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because what I really want to talk about today is my haunted rooftop. No, it's not haunted. It looks really freaky and haunted, but I have like this like lovely rooftop patio upstairs. Like there's not even like a room. It just leads to this rooftop patio that I just never use as well, which is really, really
that
sad.
makes it even more haunted. So I don't even use it. It's just cut off from the world.
I never go up there.
Yeah.
Filled with cobwebs and spirits. It is not haunted, but maybe it is. I don't know. I feel like.
Are you into paranormal stuff?
You know, it's funny. I'm not like super like actively into it, but I definitely believe in ghosts and otherworldly paranormal activity. And I feel like I filmed a movie 2 years ago in New Zealand, and I am convinced to this day that the house I was staying in was haunted. Like you cannot tell me that it wasn't. And I'm pretty sure it was like a 2-story house. Yes. And I'm pretty sure that my floor and my room was like the more haunted of the house. And I think it was a nice ghost. Like I think he was totally fine and happy and nice.
Yeah.
But there was a ghost there. No one can tell me anything different.
Well, you know, would you totally, I think you would be totally good in a sort of a thriller horror like kind of movie.
Would love to do. I'm actually like dying to do a movie like that. 100%. No pun intended.
Yeah. Talking, you know, we were talking about, you know, moving on from the Disney Channel image and stuff like that. You're not like an edgy person. It's not like you're like doing cocaine in the alleyway or something. You're a pretty grounded, you know, wholesome looking, appearing person anyways. But was it difficult to kind of shed that sort of teen Disney image? How difficult was it, or was it difficult at all?
I think everyone has an opinion on how to do that and what's the best strategy to do that. And I don't know, I've always said, and I still stick with it. It's just about being, it sounds cliche, but it's true. It's just about being genuine to yourself. So I feel like you have a lot of people from Disney Channel who have a different road in how to shed that image, whether they want to like actively do it, whether they feel like it's so not representative.
Or whether you want to do cocaine in an alleyway.
I want to do cocaine in an alleyway. I feel like for me, I think what can sometimes be challenging is I don't love the idea of being put in any box, right?
Sure.
And I feel like when you come from a you know, such a recognizable brand and such a brand that has like connotations of obviously family friendliness, which I love. Like I very much genuinely love kids and love when kids come up to me with their parents, or parents being like, oh my God, I watched this with my kid. But I, you know, so there's obviously a box that kind of goes into that brand. And then I think a lot of the times people want to really shed that image, but then they end up kind of being put in this like other box. I feel like I always if ever someone from Disney Channel like had an issue with the law or something happened, it's like that is always the headline. That's kind of just like right there.
Right,
Like,
right. Because it's good. It's
so-and-so.
clickable. It's very clickable.
Always. And it's like, I feel like there is just such a want and desire, which maybe is just a human nature thing from people, whether it's people, consumers, audiences, whatever you want to say, that really want to put artists in boxes to kind of better absorb them. I think that's what can be really tough, because for me, I believe me, and I believe every single person isn't really meant to just be one thing and be representative of just one thing. I love feeling sexy, and I love like embracing my sexuality, and I love doing it also both in a way that feels genuine to me, that maybe makes other people uncomfortable, or doing it in a way that feels appropriate, that makes other people feel like it's too safe. It really depends on the day for me, and really
Yeah,
depends,
like that whole like what's too sexy, what's not too sexy is so objective.
It's
so
like, well, I would actually argue it's actually quite subjective. Like it's like very like I very much people have their opinion on what is sexiness, what is too sexy, what is not sexy enough, what is safe, all of these different things that I again love that people, especially.
That's what I mean. I meant subjective.
I knew you did. I knew you did, but
thanks
I also
but thanks for like, yeah, I appreciate it.
I knew you did though, and I was like, I almost also went with it, but I was like, just in case you didn't mean that, I want to like.
Yeah. Thanks for not embarrassing me. I appreciate it.
I know. So, sorry, did you mean subjective? Do you know?
Objective. Yeah.
I do, by the way, that all the time. I mix up words.
Right.
But
well, speaking of that whole like what is too, I think Selena Gomez really did a great job of like putting out the blueprint of like how to do the post kid teen career, is that she can do Spring Breakers, she can do sexy photo shoots, but also do Only Murders in the Building, and probably could go back and do a Disney movie now and no one would care. You know, it would be fit right in. So
listen, I love Selena so much just as a fan, and I've also met her a couple times. She is truly as sweet and kind and good as you think she would be. But I would also venture to say, I think like every person, and I will specifically say every female or female identifying person that has come from Disney Channel, I think has done their journey in the most genuine and authentic way that they can. And I have respect for every one of those journeys. Like, I love Miley. I'm a huge Miley fan. And of course, I think a lot of people can say a lot of different things, especially about like the Bangers era, but I loved it and was like such a fan and felt it was like very artistic. I also laugh because I think, I don't know if you remember, I just remember, and I wasn't on Disney Channel that time, the Teen Choice Awards performance of when she did Party in the USA, and it had like a poll, and it was like the cover of the LA Times of like how Miley had a poll in the performance and how controversial that was. And you look back at that performance and you're like,
it's so tame. Yeah.
Not even just for Miley, but for like a lot of different
just
artists.
In general, yeah.
It's just, it was a very different world, I think, in the world that they came from. It's a very different world in the world that I was leaving Disney than even like an Olivia Rodrigo. Like every year has very much changed and morphed into the current day and contemporary time that we know now. And it is funny how we look at back in those times of what was controversial, what was too sexy, what were these things that people were putting them in these boxes, and how when you look at it with the 2023 lens, it's almost feels laughable, the labels we were putting on them.
You're totally right about the different paths to success, the post Disney thing. I mean, there's been so many great examples of people having success and their own path, whether it's risque and sexy or more wholesome, more on the, you know, Jonas Brothers side of things. But before we end this interview, I really want to talk about, you're in this Netflix movie. You did Netflix movie last year. First of all, the locations in that movie, amazing, right?
I mean, I will just say, I'm so proud. We were originally, so the Royal Treatment, which came out.
Treatment. I was like,
yeah.
Because
the thing is, I just filmed another Netflix film that isn't out yet that we also filmed in New Zealand, but that takes place in LA, so it's very different. But the royal treatment was definitely not supposed to be filmed in New Zealand. It was, as the script kind of read, more like typical, like European castle vibes, and I am so happy. New Zealand
looks English. It definitely has English castle vibes.
Yes, but I'm like so happy that we had the opportunity to film New Zealand. It really came from a necessity place of like there was no COVID there when we were filming, which was
just cheap everywhere.
Just cheap and lovely people and beautiful like nature and surroundings. I mean, I'm very proud of how our movie looks. I think it's stunning.
Are you a Lord of the Rings person when you were there? Did you like do any Lord of the Rings ventures?
So I had watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time in 2020. So I'm glad that happened. It had nothing really to do with the fact that we were going to film New Zealand because we didn't even know we were filming at that point when I watched it.
Right.
But definitely felt like, where we filmed the movie Dunedin, didn't necessarily have any Lord of the Rings like.
Yeah, I mean it's not a big country, but it's big enough that there's different parts of it. So yeah.
But the Lord of the Rings show was filming while we were filming our movie. So nothing was available. Like no trailers. Like it was
there was like a run on like equipment and there was probably like, I think about crews. There was like crew, crew issues.
I feel so lucky the crew that we ended up getting because it was like an amazing crew. And I know there was so many amazing crew members who were also, I mean, there's just a lot of amazing.
There was like Netflix and Amazon executives doing like gang battles and like.
Like, oh, okay, you guys work this out.
Yeah. I do picture like Netflix and Amazon executives being like rivals with like red and blue gang jackets on, like they're like West Side Story style or something.
You know what? I think everyone's just trying to like figure out the world that we're in.
Yeah.
I will say it's funny that you even say that because I do feel coming from a Disney Channel show, there really was that for Nickelodeon. Not for not for us. Like
and don't you dare confuse a Nickelodeon show with a Disney show or like what you were on.
Couldn't care. I feel like many actors and most of the actors would tell you they couldn't care less if you did.
Right.
But from an executive standpoint, it was a very, I don't know if it still is, but it was a very real thing.
And now you're in the reboot wars are happening now, like the Disney and Nickelodeon reboot wars. So that's fun.
It's
what I wanted to ask before you go here is you're in this the next Netflix movie you're in is an interactive romantic comedy. So first of all, what does that mean? And second, what was it like to film basically a choose your own adventure movie?
I mean, how much time do we have?
Give me the 4-minute rundown. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to even make it shorter.
Yeah.
The simplest version of what it means is that it is a romantic comedy where my character essentially has to make a lot of choices and has, on its simplest terms, 3 romantic love interests who are all 3 incredible actors, obsessed with all 3 of them. Jordy, Abbott, and Scott, freaking love them. And in its simplest terms, really, you as the audience member gets to decide who I end up with. On a more complicated terms, it really is like we have multiple endings with each of the guys. So it isn't just like 3 different endings. It's like multiple endings, multiple choices. In terms of filming that, it was really hard. And one of the most intense things I've ever done, listen, you hear the genre romantic comedy or rom-com, and you, I think, have your expectations of how, it's kind of easy to do and fluff and, not super intense acting necessarily. It was the most intense acting I had to do in my entire life, knowing, okay, if the audience chose this choice point and now we're in this scene, I will play this a different way if they chose that one. Okay, but now I'm going to do a take where I would have played it a different way if they chose the other option.
I love that you care about what the audience experience is like as an actor.
It very important to me. And I think everyone on this film really cared about that. I think I was very passionate about it as well. And I think I was very passionate about it from two aspects of how the audience is going to experience it and how we as actors could best do our jobs to make it the best experience for the audience. So it was definitely a very collaborative set, and it was one of those things where, you know, people, obviously I have so many friends in the industry and so many friends on crews who's made movies and everything. And sometimes you can vent about different things happening in a movie set to your other friends who are on a different movie set. But it was like we all were together and had this realization that nobody in the world will ever know what this experience was like except everybody in this crew, which is really kind of special, but also crazy. Anytime I was trying to talk to my like sister about it or anyone in my life, I felt like they didn't get it. I'm like, no. Like, you don't get it. It is.
And now they'll finally get to get it when they actually can see it.
Yes. And
do you know the release date? It's probably in, okay. When we know it, we'll put it up. But, and one thing you mentioned, the production values, the quality of these, the Netflix, the romantic comedies, Netflix, there's like the cinematography, the sets, the costumes. This is not your mom's over-the-air Christmas movie. I didn't name any networks. I just said over-the-air Christmas movie.
And I agree. The quality is amazing. Even like, so I can't even talk about enough how proud I am of the royal treatment, because I also produced it, and I just think everyone on the crew is incredible. Loved our director so much.
Are you going to do more producing, or was it too much of a pain?
No, I love it. I'm like, it's so intense and so much work. But you know, why not add more to my list of doing
things? You got to add more slashes.
You got to add the slashes, right? But this movie, I mean, our cinematographer Toby was the DP in Get Out, like, which is
that's that Netflix, those Netflix connections coming through. Yeah,
I mean, totally. Like, I'm very excited for people to see Choose Love. I feel like I completely agree. I'm so proud of the quality. I'm so proud of like the people I get to work with. I just feel very grateful because I think it's really like high quality, incredible people.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll let you go. The new single is out now because we're recording this. The new single is out now. Boundaries. We didn't even name it. It's Boundaries. It's called Boundaries. Yeah.
And the music video should be out now as well.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much. This was so lovely.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Laura.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye. That was Laura Marano. Her debut album will be out this fall, and the new Netflix movie, Choose Love, will be out later this year. That'll be it for me. Demi will be back next show. Until then, go to popdust.com for the latest in pop culture and music news. Follow me on Instagram at Jordan Edwards Studio, and follow Demi on Instagram at Demi_Ramos. Until next time, we'll see you later.